The wind howled through the broken city streets, cold and sharp like knives. Reed pulled his coat tighter and locked the metal door of his small workshop. It was late, and the power grid had gone down again, leaving most of the neighborhood in darkness. Only a few dim solar lamps lit the path to his home, which was nothing more than a half-fixed garage with a rusted roof and a loyal pug inside. Milo barked once, then went silent. That was strange. Usually the little dog barked non-stop when someone walked past, even if it was a delivery drone. Reed narrowed his eyes and stepped closer to the gate, his hand near the old shock baton he kept for safety. There was movement behind the trash bins, small, quick, and nervous, not a grown thief, not a wild animal. Something else, Milo, Reed called out, trying to sound calm. What is it, boy? The pug came out slowly, tail wagging, ears down, and behind him, a shape moved. A small figure crouched low, wrapped in a dirty cloth, barely more than a bundle of bones and shadows. The figure flinched when Reed stepped closer. He could see her better now. An alien girl, maybe 10 years old, trembling and barefoot on the cold cement. Her skin was pale lavender with faint blue markings running along her arms and neck. Her eyes glowed slightly in the dark, wide with fear, locked on him like a trapped animal. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stared. It's all right, Reed said softly, lowering the baton. I won't hurt you. The girl looked at Milo, who wagged his tail and patted over to her. She reached out slowly, touched the pug's head, and something in her body relaxed. She knelt beside him and pressed her forehead to his warm fur, breathing fast like she had been running for hours. Reed looked around, but there was no one else. No sign of pursuit. She was alone, and it was freezing outside. He couldn't just leave her there. Come inside, he said, gesturing toward the garage, just for the night. The girl didn't answer, but followed when Milo trotted ahead. Inside, the garage was warmer, lit by a single solar bulb and a flickering screen. Reed handed her a blanket and a protein bar. She sniffed the food like she didn't trust it, but after a moment she took a small bite, then quickly ate the rest like she hadn't eaten in days. What's your name? Reed asked, watching her closely. She didn't answer, just pulled the blanket tighter and looked down. He tried again. Where are your parents? Silence. Reed sighed and rubbed his face. This was trouble. Big trouble. She wasn't just lost. She was scared, hiding from something, maybe someone. And those glowing marks on her arms. They weren't natural. They looked like tech, bioluminescent, implants or tattoos, but alive, moving slowly under her skin like light flowing through wires. He didn't say anything, didn't want to scare her. Milo curled up beside her, and she leaned against him as if the little dog was the only safe thing in the universe. Soon, her eyes closed, and her breathing slowed. She was asleep. Reed turned off the screen, sat in the chair nearby, and watched her sleep. The way she held the dog, the way she twitched and murmured in her dreams. It reminded him of the refugee camps he used to help with years ago. He thought he was done with all that. He thought he could live a quiet life, fixing things, ignoring the wars, the politics, the alien experiments, and the endless reports of missing children from the outer colonies. But now one of them was here, in his home, asleep beside his dog. And as he leaned back, his eyes grew heavy too. He didn't notice that the blue light in her markings began to glow brighter, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Didn't notice that the air around her grew slightly colder, or that the metal toolbox near her feet started to rust just a little. The girl in the shadows wasn't just scared. She was hiding something inside her, something the sunrise would soon reveal. The sun rose slowly over the city ruins, painting the cracked rooftops in soft gold. Inside the garage, Reed stretched and yawned, the chill of morning creeping in through the thin walls. He rubbed his eyes and looked toward the blanket near the corner. The alien girl was still there, curled up beside Milo, her face peaceful. For a moment, everything felt normal. But then he noticed something strange. The metal toolbox beside her was covered in rust. It had been cleaned last night, polished even. Now the edges were flaking, orange and brittle like it had aged years in just a few hours. Reed knelt down to touch it. The surface crumbled beneath his fingers. Not natural. Not possible. His eyes shifted back to the girl, and suddenly he felt cold. Not from the air, but from the question rising in his chest. What are you? She stirred and sat up slowly, blinking in the light. Her eyes weren't glowing anymore, just dull gray. Her skin looked paler too, and her blue markings had faded slightly. Milo nudged her hand and she gave him a small smile. Still, she didn't say a word. Reed made some hot water and handed her a cup. She took it gently and sipped, warming her hands against the metal. You sleep all right? He asked, trying to sound casual. She nodded once, her eyes not meeting his. He thought about asking more, where she came from, what she was running from, but he didn't want to scare her. Instead, he placed an old mirror on the workbench and turned to fix a broken circuit board. Behind him, he heard the girl gasp softly. He looked back quickly. She had frozen at the sight of the mirror. Her body trembled, and she turned away fast, like the reflection had burned her. Her hands covered her face, and she sank to the floor, breathing hard. Reed moved the mirror away, feeling a deep unease crawl through him. No mirror, huh? He said quietly, more to himself than her. She didn't respond, just pulled the blanket tight again and stared at the ground. He walked outside, needing air, needing space. The sun felt good on his skin, but the questions in his head grew heavier. He opened the storage unit beside his garage, an old city terminal still connected to the net. Most people didn't use it anymore, but Reed kept it running for emergencies. Typing quickly, he searched recent alerts, missing persons, refugee, reports escapees. One file flashed red. Classified clearance required. He bypassed it using an old code from his engineering days. The screen flickered, then displayed a blurry photo. It was her, hair dirty, markings glowing, eyes bright with fear. Subject: Nova class. Containment: Escape. Status: Extremely dangerous, unstable, do not approach alone. Last seen: Nova Station. Research facility, destroyed during breach. Reed stepped back from the screen, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. He looked again. Yes, it was her, no doubt, but she didn't seem dangerous. She seemed broken, scared, and alone. He downloaded the file onto a chip and returned to the garage. She was still there, sitting quietly, petting Milo with soft strokes. She looked up at him, her face calm but unreadable. He wanted to ask, is it true? Did you destroy that place? Are you the danger they fear? But he couldn't speak the words, not yet. Instead, he walked over and crouched in front of her. I saw a file today, he said slowly. They said your kind was part of a program, something called Nova class. The girl looked away, hugging her knees. They say you're unstable, that you hurt people. She didn't react, not at first, but then she whispered one word, so faint he almost missed. Lie. Reed blinked. What? Lie, she said again, louder this time, eyes shining with something between fear and anger. They lie. She reached into the blanket and pulled out a metal tag. Half melted, marked with human numbers and codes. It matched the ones in the file. But below them, written in a different language, was her real name. Letters glowing faintly in violet ink. Reed took a deep breath, trying to understand. She had been part of something terrible. Not a monster, but a victim. Milo barked suddenly, jumping up and running to the door. Reed followed, opening it slowly. A government drone floated by overhead. Scanning the area with red lights, it paused for a second over the garage, then moved on. The girl had vanished into the back corner. Hidden behind boxes, her breathing was fast and shallow, her hands glowing faintly under the blanket. Reed shut the door and turned to her. You're not safe here, he said quietly. They're looking for you, aren't they? She nodded, slowly, eyes wide. Then we need to figure something out, he said, kneeling beside her. Because I think you've got more than just fear inside you. She looked down at Milo, who licked her hand again, and her glow faded just a little. Whatever her secret was, it wasn't just dangerous, it was growing, and morning light had only shown a glimpse of what was coming. The city was quiet. Too quiet for a place that once buzzed with transport shuttles and food vendors. Reed stood outside the garage, watching the sky with narrowed eyes. He could still feel the tension from the drone flyby. It had hovered longer than normal, like it sensed something it couldn't explain. Nova hadn't spoken since, not a word. She sat in the corner now, hugging Milo, her little hands gripping his fur like a lifeline. Reed returned to the workshop, locked the door, and took out the chip he'd downloaded earlier. He connected it to his old tablet, and the screen flickered to life. He scrolled through the documents quickly, searching for anything that might explain who she was, what they did to her, and what he was now caught in. Project Nova class. Biotech weaponization protocol status. Terminated due to containment failure. Survivors 0. Official report. Unconfirmed escapee. Subject 7 Delta. Classified as emotionally unstable reactive energy core. Approach with extreme caution. His hands tightened around the device. Survivors 0, it said. But Nova was here. Alive. They lied. Why? Images popped up on screen. Lab rooms filled with children, all with glowing marks, some screaming, some hooked to machines. One of them was Nova, younger, smaller but unmistakable. The same blue streaks on her arms, the same sad eyes, and behind her, a human in a lab coat writing something with a cold face. Reed clenched his jaw, the air thick with the weight of what he was learning. They didn't just experiment, they created living weapons, and then they erased them, covered up the truth. If Nova had escaped, she wasn't just running from danger. She was the secret. Suddenly, a soft knock tapped on the wall behind him. He turned to see Nova peeking around the doorway, her eyes curious. She pointed at the tablet, her expression unreadable. "You want to see this?" he asked gently. She nodded. Reed placed the tablet on the table and motioned for her to sit. Milo followed and lay between them, his tail wagging slowly, sensing the tension but staying calm. Nova stared at the screen as if it hurt her to look. She reached out and touched one of the pictures, an image of a glowing cage. A memory flashed in her eyes and she whispered, "Cold." Reed looked at her, waiting. She pointed to a word in the file. "Reactive energy core." Then she pointed to her chest and said, "Inside. They put Storm." Reed's breath caught. "They put something inside you?" She nodded, her eyes full of pain. "Storm grows when afraid, when sad. It breaks things." Her voice shook. "I didn't want it. They made me." Reed leaned back, trying to think if she was telling the truth, and everything in the file suggested she was. Then she wasn't just running from danger, she was danger in the eyes of the government, because she had something they thought was destroyed. And now that Storm was unstable, waking up again. "Why come here?" he asked gently. "Why find me?" She looked at Milo, smiled faintly and said, "Warm." Then added, "You kind, most hurt, but you gave blanket." Reed didn't know what to say. He had just acted on instinct, but maybe that small kindness was the only thing holding her Storm back. He closed the file and slid the tablet away. "I won't let them take you," he said firmly, "but you have to trust me." Nova looked at him, eyes wide, glowing again, not in anger, but hope. Then, for the first time, she said something unexpected, something that made his heart skip. "I don't want to break again." The lights flickered above them, but then steadied. Outside, the wind had picked up, blowing dust across the street. Reed knew time was running out. The drone was no accident, and if the government still tracked Nova-class signals, they'd be back, and next time they wouldn't knock. He stood up, pacing. There had to be a plan, someplace safe, somewhere to hide or reach out for real help. But who could he trust? Suddenly he remembered something. An old contact from his repair days. An engineer who once worked in off-planet comms. She ran a hidden uplink station in the mountains, long abandoned but still half operational. If anyone could help them send a message far enough to someone beyond Earth, maybe to Nova's people, it was her. Reed turned back to the girl, kneeling down to her level. "Would you go with me?" he asked. "Somewhere safe, away from here?" Nova tilted her head, thinking. Then she touched his hand softly and whispered, "Okay." Milo barked once as if he approved. They didn't know what waited out there. Drones, soldiers, maybe worse. But Reed had made a choice. He wouldn't let her be hunted, caged or erased like a forgotten file. Not when she finally had a chance to be something more than a secret. And as they packed that night, the storm inside her pulsed quietly. Not angry this time, not afraid. Just waiting for whatever came next. The sun had barely dipped below the horizon when Reed finished packing the old hover cart. It wasn't fast, but it was quiet, and that mattered more now. The comm station, in the mountains, was miles away, hidden past frozen hills and broken roads. If they wanted to reach it without being caught, they'd have to move by night. Nova sat on the edge of the cart, holding Milo in her arms, her glowing marks hidden under layers of warm clothes. She hadn't spoken much all day, but her eyes watched everything, alert and tired at the same time. Reed checked the sky one last time. No drones, no noise. Just wind and clouds moving fast. "All right," he said, gripping the handle of the cart. "Let's go." The path led through old industrial zones, long abandoned after the war. Twisted steel beams rose like bones from cracked roads. Nova shivered under her coat, not from the cold, but from something deeper. Her breathing grew heavy, her hands clutching Milo tighter. Reed noticed and slowed down. "You okay?" he asked, glancing back. She nodded, but her skin had started to glow faintly through her sleeves. Blue light pulsed from under her coat, dim at first, then brighter, like waves of energy rolling beneath her skin. Milo whined softly, pressing against her, trying to calm her down. "Storm, not sleep," she whispered, eyes wide. "It wakes." Reed stopped the cart, heart pounding. "Is it hurting you?" he asked quickly. She shook her head, but her voice trembled. "It wants out. When I feel too much." Reed knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe, all right?" he said calmly. "Nothing bad's going to happen, not while I'm here." Nova looked at him, tears in her glowing eyes, and nodded slowly. Her breathing slowed, the light under her skin faded just a little. Milo licked her fingers, and she hugged him close. The storm was still there, but held back for now. They kept moving through the darkness, passing shattered buildings and silent fences. Reed's legs ached, but he pushed forward, knowing they couldn't stop. Not until they reached the mountain road. The temperature dropped as they climbed higher, frost forming on the cart's frame. Still, Nova didn't complain, even when her lips turned pale from the cold. Around midnight, they found an old shelter, a small outpost buried halfway in the earth. The roof had caved in, but the basement was dry and hidden. Reed guided them inside, setting up a small heater from his pack. Nova sat near it, curled up with Milo again, her eyes half closed. She looked calm, but Reed could see the faint flicker of light under her collar. As he unpacked rations, Nova opened her eyes suddenly. Her body was glowing again, but this time not from fear. The light was brighter now, flowing through her arms, fingers, even her neck. She looked down at her hands, confused, afraid, and amazed at the same time. "It's growing," she whispered, "even when I'm not scared." Reed watched in silence, unsure what to say. Then the light began to shift, changing shape, moving in patterns across her skin like language. Lines and symbols danced across her arms, glowing brighter and faster. Her eyes turned fully blue, no pupils, no whites, just pure energy. "Milo," she whispered, hugging him close. "Hold me." The pug barked once and curled into her chest. Instantly, the light softened, the wild symbols slowed. Her body relaxed again, like the presence of the little dog brought her back to herself. Reed knelt down beside her, staring in awe. "I think he's grounding you," he said slowly. "Like a balance." Nova nodded, still glowing softly. "They wanted the storm," she whispered. but never gave me peace. She touched Milo's ear. He's peace. Reed sat beside her, not speaking for a long while. The fire flickered, casting shadows on the walls. Outside, a wind howled down the valley, carrying faint metallic hums. Reed stiffened. He recognized that sound. Drone engines, not far. He stood, quickly, and shut off the heater. The warmth faded, replaced by silence. Nova's glow faded too as she sensed the danger. "We have to move soon," he said, checking the gear. Nova didn't argue, just stood and followed. Milo tucked in her, arms like a baby. But before they left, she turned to him and whispered something that sent chills down his spine. "If they catch me, they will cut me open again." Reed's hands clenched. "No one's cutting anyone," he said firmly. "Not while I'm here." Outside, red dots flashed through the mist, scanning in silence. The hunters had arrived, but they were too late. The storm girl and the man who sheltered her were already moving again, this time toward a signal tower, a chance. And maybe, if they were lucky, a future. But deep in Nova's chest, the storm pulsed stronger than ever. Not angry, not sad. Just waiting for the right moment. The night she glowed would not be forgotten. The sky turned silver with early morning light as Reed pushed the hovercart up the steep hill. The trees thinned, the road turned to gravel, and snow crunched beneath their boots. Nova walked beside him now, holding Milo tight under her jacket. Her glowing had stopped, but her eyes looked tired, like she was holding something back, something heavy and alive inside her. They were getting close. Just beyond the ridge lay the satellite uplink station, abandoned, old, but still reachable. If they could send a signal, maybe someone would answer. Someone who cared about Nova's kind, someone who wouldn't call her a weapon. Reed's muscles burned, but he didn't stop. Not until a sudden sharp beep from his old wristband made him freeze. He checked the screen. It was a warning. A transport vehicle had just entered the area, no ID code, moving fast. His stomach dropped. "They found us," he muttered. Nova looked up at him, confused. "What's wrong?" she whispered, already sensing his fear. Reed didn't answer. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the trees, off the road, into the forest. They crouched behind a thick fallen log as the sound of heavy wheels echoed through the trees. Then, it appeared, a long black van with no lights and no markings, silent, smooth, and deadly. It moved slowly along the road, scanning both sides with glowing red beams. Nova's grip on Milo tightened, her breathing fast and shaky. Reed placed a finger on her lips, then motioned for silence. The van stopped, right near where their footprints crossed the road. Two men stepped out, both in dark armor, their faces hidden by black helmets. One of them took out a scanner, the other carried a containment unit. They moved like they'd done this before many times. "She's here," one of them said through a static voice modulator. "Signal's still active." Nova's eyes filled with terror. She buried her face in Milo's fur, her markings glowing faintly through her sleeves. Reed wrapped an arm around her and whispered, "Don't glow, Nova. Stay with me. Breathe." The men scanned the forest edge, getting closer. Reed could see their boots now, only meters away. Then Milo sneezed. The sound was small, but enough. Both agents turned instantly toward the log, weapons raised. Reed stood up slowly, hands up, trying to look calm. "Easy," he said. "I'm just a repairman passing through, nothing to hide." They stepped closer. One of them scanned him, then the ground behind him. The scanner beeped wildly when pointed. "Toward the log, move aside," the taller agent ordered. Now Reed didn't move. "Whatever you think is back there," he said slowly. "You're wrong." The agent raised his weapon. But before he could fire, the log behind Reed exploded in blue light. Nova stepped out, holding Milo, her eyes glowing like fire. The storm had awakened again, pulsing through her skin, her voice shaking the air. "No more cages," she shouted. The men stumbled back as energy crackled through the ground, splitting stones and lighting the snow with electric blue. Milo barked but didn't run, staying close to her feet, as if shielding her from her own storm. Reed moved fast, grabbed the containment unit from the stunned agent, and smashed it against a tree. Sparks flew, alarms blared. The other agent tried to call for backup, but his comm went dead in his hand, crushed by invisible force. Nova wasn't just glowing now. She was radiating, waves of energy pushing. Outward like a heartbeat from another world. "Nova, stop," Reed called out, stepping toward her. "You're not like them, remember? You have a choice." Her eyes flickered, the storm paused. Milo ran up and licked her hand, and just like before, her glow dimmed, the energy pulling back into her body. The snow stopped melting, the ground stopped shaking. She dropped to her knees, breathing hard, eyes full of tears. Reed rushed over, pulling her into his arms. "It's okay," he whispered. "You didn't hurt anyone, you stopped yourself." The agents lay unconscious, buried in snow and broken branches. The van's lights blinked weakly, system fried from the energy pulse. They had a few minutes, maybe less. "We need to go," Reed said, helping Nova to her feet. "This was just a scout team, more will come." Nova wiped her eyes and nodded. "I almost lost control," she whispered. "But you pulled me back." Reed looked at her, amazed by her strength. "You're not a weapon," he said. "You're a person, and you're not alone anymore." They moved quickly, vanishing into the woods before the next wave could arrive. The uplink station was close now, just a few miles away, and with every step, the bond between the human, the alien girl, and the loyal little pug grew stronger. Whatever was inside Nova, whatever the storm really was, Reed knew one thing for sure. She wasn't here to destroy. She was here to survive, and maybe, just maybe, to change everything. The forest behind them burned with blue light. Fading slowly as the cold wind blew across the snow, Reed didn't look back. He kept one hand on the cart and the other wrapped around Nova's shoulder, guiding her forward through the frozen path. Milo trotted beside them, leaving tiny paw prints. In the white, always close to her side, they had no more time to waste. The black van was down, but others would come, smarter and stronger. Nova walked quietly now, her face pale, her arms wrapped tight around her chest. She hadn't spoken since the storm burst out of her. Reed didn't pressure her, but he could see it. Something inside her had changed. She was afraid not just of being caught, but of herself. Afraid of what might happen if the storm returned. Again, the uplink station finally came into view. Tall, broken, but still standing above the cliff. Its metal tower leaned slightly, covered in frost and vines once it had connected to outer worlds carrying signals across stars. Now it was dead. Unless Reed could fix it. "This is it," he said, nodding toward the station. "We're almost safe." Nova didn't reply, but her eyes studied the tower, like it reminded her of something old and painful. She placed a hand on the frozen metal and whispered, "This, like the ones on my world." Reed paused, surprised. "You remember your world?" She nodded slowly. "Blue sky, 3 moons, warm winds, but no cages." Reed smiled gently. "Sounds better than this place." They entered the station through a broken service hatch, crawling past shattered consoles and wires hanging like vines inside. It was dark and cold, but safe. For now, Reed set up a small lamp and went straight to the control panel. He opened it and sighed. Most of it's junk. Nova sat beside Milo on the floor, hugging her knees. "I can try to wake it up," Reed said, more to himself. "If we boost the old signal dish and link it to the outer grid, maybe, just maybe someone will hear us." He worked fast, hands moving through wires, rerouting power from old cells he carried in his pack. Hours passed, the wind howled outside, and Nova stayed silent the whole time. Until finally, click, a soft hum filled the air. The lights flickered on the panel, faint but real. Reed grinned. "We're in." He turned toward Nova but froze. She was glowing again, but different this time. The light wasn't pulsing wildly or burning the air. It was calm, warm, like moonlight moving under her skin. "I can help," she whispered, standing up. "I remember the code." Reed blinked. "What code?" Nova stepped closer to the console, her hand hovering over the cracked keypad. "They gave us memories, locked codes inside, in case we escaped." She touched the console and her markings began to shift. forming patterns that matched the machine. A low tone echoed through the tower, and the screen lit up. Connected. A signal began to rise, moving upward through the antenna, bursting into the sky like a flare. Reed stared in disbelief. "You did it." But Nova didn't smile. She looked tired, her body swaying like she could barely stand. Reed caught her before she fell, holding her gently. "You okay?" he asked, worried. "The storm, it listens to the code," she murmured. "But it takes our energy." She closed her eyes, breathing shallow. Reed wrapped her in a blanket, letting her rest near the old battery coils. Milo curled up beside her, his head resting on her arm like a guard. The signal now pulsed out into space, calling to anyone who might hear. Maybe her people. Maybe someone who knew what Nova Class really was. But Reed knew that signal could also attract attention from the wrong ears. The agents. The ones who wanted her captured and silent. They wouldn't wait long to trace it. He looked at the scanner. Blinking red, movement incoming. Just over the ridge, drones, armored boots, another black van. They were coming again. Reed checked. His weapon just a small charge blaster not meant for real fights. He wasn't a soldier, just a fixer, a survivor. But today he'd fight if he had to. Not for a secret. Not for a mission. For a girl who glowed like a storm and called his pug Peace. Suddenly Nova stirred, her eyes opening slowly. "I heard them," she whispered. "In my sleep. They're close." Reed nodded. "Then we hold them off. Just long enough." "Long enough for what?" she asked. He pointed upward where the signal dish turned slowly toward the stars. For someone to answer. Nova stood up again, wobbling slightly, but strong. "I won't run anymore," she said softly. "If they come, I'll protect you." Reed smiled, proud and heartbroken at the same time. "You're just a kid," he said. "You shouldn't have to protect anyone." Nova looked at Milo, then at Reed. "Then let's protect each other." Outside, engines roared in the snow and red lights cut through the trees. But inside the tower, something powerful was rising. Stronger than the storm inside her. It was trust, it was family, it was hope, and they were ready. Snow fell like ash from the sky as the black vans approached. Their engines were low and heavy, the kind used by those who didn't ask questions. Drones circled above the trees, scanning heat signatures, searching for one specific glow, the storm girl, the experiment, the mistake they thought they buried. But this time, Nova wasn't running. Inside the broken satellite tower, Reed checked the last remaining power cell. It was nearly drained, but the signal was still broadcasting. Above them, the old dish turned slowly toward the stars, blinking once every few seconds. Reed prayed someone, anyone, was listening out. There Nova stood near the console, her hands resting on the glass, her body still glowing faintly. But the glow wasn't violent now. It was steady, controlled, like a flame she had finally learned to hold in her hands. Milo sat at her feet, tail wagging once in a while, sensing the tension, but not afraid. "They're close," Nova whispered, her eyes narrowing. "I can feel them through the storm." Reed nodded, loading the last round into his charge blaster. It was barely enough to scare off one soldier, let alone a squad. But he didn't care. He wasn't letting them take her, not after everything. "Maybe we can stall them just long enough," he muttered. "If someone answers the signal." Nova turned toward him, her voice soft but sure. "They already answered." Reed blinked. "What?" Nova pointed at the stars above. "Listen." A low hum vibrated through the tower's metal frame. Not from the console, not from the earth. It was coming from the sky. Then the clouds broke open with a thunderous roar. A silver ship appeared above them. Smooth, silent, shaped like a falling star. Its lights pulsed in the same rhythm as Nova's markings. The drones in the air suddenly sparked and dropped, one by one, falling like broken toys. Reed stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the brightness. The black vans below froze, their systems jammed, weapons shut down by an invisible force. Soldiers shouted, but nothing worked. Their signals were dead. Their armor useless, Nova walked past Reed and into the snow, barefoot, glowing like a beacon. The ship hovered low above the trees, and a soft beam of light shined down. A figure appeared inside it, tall, elegant, with the same glowing lines. Across her skin, her voice echoed in a language Reed didn't know, but Nova did. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Mother." The figure nodded slowly, reaching out through the light. Nova turned to Reed, her voice trembling. "They heard me. They followed the code. They came for me." Reed nodded, smiling gently even as his heart ached. "You're safe now," he said. "Really safe," Milo barked, tilting his head as if asking, "What now?" Nova bent down and scooped him up in her arms. "I want him to—" "Come," she said. He kept the storm quiet. Reed laughed softly, shaking his head. He always did have a special heart. The light grew brighter, pulling Nova and Milo upward slowly. But before she vanished, Nova reached out one last time. She pressed her hand to Reed's chest, and a small flicker of blue light passed into him. A gift, not energy, not danger, but memory. A piece of her story, her truth, her name. The ship rose into the clouds, vanishing like a dream. The snow fell quiet again, and the forest stood still. The black vans turned around and left, defeated, confused, erased from power without a shot fired. They would report nothing, because they had no proof, only fear. Reed stood alone outside the tower, the wind brushing through his coat. He looked up at the stars, smiling through tired eyes. "She made it," he whispered. "She really made it." Weeks passed, the tower silent again. The power long gone, Reed returned to his simple life, fixing broken machines, patching old roofs, feeding strays. But sometimes at night he'd hear a soft hum in the air like a whisper from far above, and sometimes he'd see a silver light drift across the sky, circling once, then fading into the stars. One evening, a small box appeared on his doorstep. No name, no sender, just a soft blue glow under the lid. Inside was a single collar with a tag that read, "Milo, Peacekeeper," and a folded piece of cloth, soft and warm, with symbols only he could now understand. He held it close, smiling, because he knew. Out there in the stars, Nova was alive. Not hunted, not broken, not a weapon, but something better. A voice, a storm, a girl who once slept beside a human's pug and chose her own destiny at sunrise.